Circling the wagons, North Korea faces widespread condemnation at the UN as the U.S. demands resolutions that will truly put pressure on Pyongyang. Abroad again, Donald Trump lands in Europe ahead of a big meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and the Venezuelan crisis deepens. Supporters of the embattled president storm the opposition-held National Assembly as it ends in bloodshed. Thanks for being with me, everyone. I'm Amara Walker. Michael Holmes is on assignment, and this is CNN Today. The world is on notice, and the watered-down resolutions will not do. That message from America's ambassador to the UN a few hours ago during emergency talks at the UN Security Council. A day after North Korea's first intercontinental ballistic missile launch, Nikki Haley told the Security Council the U.S. will not just call for tougher sanctions, it's also going after countries that do business with North Korea. Michelle Kaczynski has more.
Members of the Security Council.
An emergency meeting at the United Nations.
I must say that today is a dark day. It is a dark day because yesterday's actions by North Korea made the world a more dangerous place. Their illegal missile launch was not only dangerous, but reckless and irresponsible.
Kim Jong-un has been undaunted, despite the unprecedented sanctions the UN imposed a year ago on the already isolated nation. His latest launch of new technology, heralded as a 4th of July gift for the American bastards, an intercontinental ballistic missile that flew more than 500 miles, one that could be capable of reaching the United States.
It showed that North Korea does not want to be part of a peaceful world. They have cast a dark shadow of conflict on all nations that strive for peace.
And the U.S. issuing a strong warning to other countries, especially China, that continue to feed the North Korean regime with steady and even increased trade.
There are countries that are allowing, even encouraging, trade with North Korea in violation of UN Security Council resolutions. Such countries would also like to continue their trade arrangements with the United States. That's not going to happen. Time is short. Action is required. The world is on notice.
China and Russia, though, have been resistant to putting the clamps on.
We are against any statements or actions which could lead to an escalation and hardening of antagonism. We call for all interested states to act with restraint rather than provocation and warmongering.
And it's no secret why.
President Trump's challenge is going to be to really get China and Russia to help box in North Korea. But so far, there's basically no leverage because the Chinese want to keep North Korea exactly the way it is.
And now China and Russia have agreed to work together on the matter, putting out a statement yesterday that was essentially a rebuke of the U.S.'s methods, calling for the U.S. and South Korea to stop working together on missile defense and end their joint military exercises. The Pentagon's response, a rebuke of its own. Video showing missile defense exercises in action, which it plans to continue. Today, South Korea released yet another defiant visual, simulating an attack on the North. As the Trump administration amps up its rhetoric, it remains unclear how far the U.S. will go to stop North Korea.
Their actions are quickly closing off the possibility of a diplomatic solution. The United States is prepared to use the full range of our capabilities to defend ourselves and our allies.
So today, on the one hand, you see China and Russia united in their view, saying dialogue has to come first, even without preconditions, which the U.S. has opposed, saying you have to be creative with diplomacy, and they oppose ramping up the rhetoric that they think is only exacerbating the situation. In response, the U.S. says because nothing has worked, it's time to do more, telling the Security Council that if you're going to sit there and not vote for additional sanctions against North Korea, then you are holding hands with Kim Jong-un. Amara?
Strong words there, Michelle Kaczynski. Thank you. Let's get reaction now from the region. Paula Hancock is live at our Seoul bureau, but we begin with Alexandria Field in Beijing. Alexandra, while China condemns North Korea's missile launches, it's not exactly on the same page with the U.S., is it?
No, it certainly isn't. They've aligned themselves with Russia when it comes to what the perceived solution is here. They did offer a condemnation of that launch at the UN Security Council meeting, but it's certainly not going to go very far in terms of quelling Washington's frustration with Beijing, which they have been looking at as a partner in trying to rein in the North Korean regime. Words for now are just words, but here's what China's ambassador to the UN had to say.
The launching of a ballistic missile by the DPRK on July 4th was a flagrant violation of the relevant Council resolutions and the flaunting of the will of the entire international community. China finds this launching unacceptable.
Unacceptable, but you did hear earlier this week both the Chinese President Xi Jinping and the Russian President Vladimir Putin saying really that both sides hold responsibility here and that everyone needs to stop ratcheting up the tension that has increased to the growing problem on the Korean Peninsula. Don't forget, Emra, that this launch happened at the time when President Xi Jinping was sitting down with President Putin for a state visit that was happening in Moscow. The two leaders have come together to present what they see as the path forward, along with calling for cooler heads to prevail. They're again calling for this freeze for freeze proposal by which North Korea would desist in the development of its nuclear program. In exchange, the U.S. and South Korea would stop their annual military exercises, which so enrage Pyongyang. Pyongyang sees that as preparation for an invasion. The U.S. has not responded to that proposal. It's not something that they are considering. And in fact, after that launch happened, you did see the U.S. military and the South Korean military again join forces in another military show of strength. But right now, the U.S. is making its approach clear, at least at the UN Security Council meeting, with strong words from the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, again saying that the U.S. is looking at all countries that do illegal business with North Korea, and pointing out once again that 90% of trade with North Korea comes from China. So certainly this continuous effort from Washington to try and turn up the heat on Beijing. Amara?
Beijing holds the economic lifeline for North Korea. Alex, thank you for that. Let's turn over to Paula Hancock in Seoul. Paula, we heard there from Alex talking about this freeze-to-freeze proposal being called on by Russia and China, and this is something, suspending the joint military drills, that's not something that's up for negotiation, is it?
It doesn't appear to be. It certainly hasn't been in the past. This isn't the first time that China has floated this idea. They've said it for some time now that they think that the U.S. and South Korean military drills should be downsized, should be put on hold so that they can secure this freeze. And they also have been pointing out this the THAAD, the U.S. missile defense system that's now in South Korea. They are very much against that, thinking that it jeopardizes their own defenses, and they're calling on that to be dismantled and sent back home as well. So these are things that the U.S. and certainly South Korea are not willing to consider at this point. In fact, we had a statement from the General Vincent Brooks, who's the head of the U.S. forces in Korea, along with his Korean counterpart, which said, quote, "Self-restraint, which is a choice, is all that separates armistice and war." Now, much stronger words than we're used to hearing from General Brooks, really showing that this coming at the same time, of course, as those the military drills between the U.S. and South Korea in response to that ICBM launch. So I think really that's an answer in itself. Amara?
All right, Paula Hancock reporting from Seoul. Thank you very much, Paula. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump has arrived in Europe ahead of the G20 summit in Germany. Mr. Trump and his wife, the First Lady Melania, stepped off Air Force One in the Polish capital Warsaw just a few hours ago. And on Thursday, he will head off to a summit in Hamburg. But as CNN international diplomatic editor Nick Robertson reports, Mr. Trump and his fellow leaders will be facing a world of complex challenges and political troubles.
Of the world's 20 most powerful leaders gathering in Hamburg, these two will steal the spotlight.
If Putin likes Donald Trump, I consider that an asset, not a liability.
He is a brilliant and talented person, without a doubt.
Now, I don't know Putin.
And now in Germany at the G20, they will under intense speculation about Russian meddling in the 2016 presidential election.
I would love to be able to get along with Russia.
Trump has said so much about Putin in the past 4 years, 80 comments and counting. Their coming together could offer a filtering of fact from fiction. And now the pull-aside meeting has been upgraded to a fully fledged bilat. But that doesn't mean President Trump will actually bring up the election hacking. Indeed, don't count on any of the 20 leaders here agreeing on anything significant. They've rarely been less united. Trump's last global outing at the G7 a month ago saw him dissing his partners, flatly refusing to join them endorsing the Paris Climate Change Agreement, a topic on the G20 agenda. He has become not just disengaged, but estranged on the world stage. Putin, who has become a pariah at these events since he invaded Ukraine and annexed Crimea, can expect more cold shoulders. All this as the host, Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor, goes to the polls later this year. She needs a successful summit. And she won't be the only one worried. The Turkish President, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who left the last G20 the leader of a democracy and returns an autocrat. And then the Saudis, arriving with excess diplomatic baggage. A Gulf standoff with Qatar is unlikely to grow positively at the G20. The cast of characters is long, and so is their list of problems. The British PM weakened, needing new friends. Perhaps the ray on the horizon.
Thank you very much.
The new French President Macron, who bounced into his first global outing in May, signalling to Trump he is not first among equals. A message he'll likely hear in his bilat with Putin too. Nick Robertson, CNN, Hamburg, Germany.
And last hour, I spoke with a Council on Foreign Relations senior fellow and Georgetown University professor Charles Kupchan. I asked him if the G20 summit will be the biggest test yet of Mr. Trump's leadership skills.
He went to Europe only a few weeks ago, and it was a bit of a bust. Went to a NATO meeting and then to a meeting of the G7 in Italy, and it was bad enough that Chancellor Merkel of Germany said afterward, boy, we can't count on our traditional allies. Europe may have to be on its own. So, one hopes that this coming meeting is better. It's not set up to be so, because on the key issues on the agenda, including the Paris Climate Agreement, immigration and refugees, and free trade, Trump seems to be outside the mainstream. So it's unclear exactly whether this is a chance to repair the relationship that was damaged during his first trip.
What about on North Korea? What will you be watching for? Because we know President Trump will be meeting on the sidelines of the G20 with President Xi. And ahead of that meeting, Trump tweeting some criticism aimed at Xi, basically saying this, quote, trade between China and North Korea grew almost 40% in the first quarter. So much for China working with us, but we had to give it a try. We saw that warming relationship between President Xi and Trump on display in Mar-a-Lago a few months back. And now this criticism, it seems like President Trump is struggling to find a way to deal with Xi ahead of this meeting.
Well, Trump came out of the box saying to the Chinese, listen, you got to help us out here. You need to tighten the screws on North Korea. You need to hem them in economically as a way of putting pressure on the regime on the nuclear question. That hasn't happened. And President Trump has actually said in a tweet earlier than the one that you mentioned that, hey, the Chinese aren't playing ball here. And you will notice that over the last week or two, the Trump administration has done things that the Chinese don't like, including sending a warship close to disputed islands not too far from China, including talking about imposing economic protectionism against Chinese steel. A couple other issues on the agenda the Chinese aren't happy with. So this is not going to be an easy discussion with Xi. But I do think that given that the North Koreans just launched what appears to have been an ICBM, Trump is going to be looking to the Chinese as well as the other members of the G20 to try to increase economic sanctions. That seems to be the best play that the United States has right now.
And regarding this formal bilateral meeting between President Trump and Putin, the fact that there is no agenda for this meeting, I mean, usually these kinds of sit-downs are carefully choreographed. Is that a good thing that there is no agenda? I mean, doesn't that make President Trump a bit vulnerable if he's caught off guard?
You know, it's a little bit worrisome because you would like to see the two sides come in with enough common ground that they could make some progress, whether it's on Syria or Ukraine or the whole question of hacking and interfering in Western elections. I guess you could justify it on the grounds that this is the first time that Trump and Putin will sit down face to face. They are both leaders that want to build a strong personal relationship. They're going to find common ground and that they're both veer to the right. They're nationalists, they're populists. And so my guess is that they're going to be able to build some kind of personal bond, but I'm not expecting any breakthroughs here, precisely because, as you mentioned, if there's no agenda, nothing is teed up. The people below them haven't been able to come together to say, okay, this is what we're going to work on when it comes to Syria. This is what we're going to work on when it comes to Ukraine. Without that kind of homework, I really don't expect much to come out of the meeting other than perhaps some feel-good statements about laying the groundwork for a friendship.
All right, thanks to Charles Kupchan for that conversation. Still to come on CNN today, Venezuela's National Assembly becomes a bloody battleground. It is the latest escalation in the country's ongoing economic and political crisis. Then later, foreign ministers from 4 Arab countries meet on the crisis involving Qatar, the latest in a report ahead.
Hong Kong, long known as a global financial hub, but there's much more to this city of 7 million people.
Hong Kong is a very eclectic place. It's a city of big contrasts.
Go beyond its striking skyline and learn what makes this place unlike any other on Earth. Experience its creative spirit and get a taste of its unique culture.
I'm Christy Lustout in Tayo, and join me for Iconic Hong Kong,
a CNN special Friday.
Hello? What time's the flight?
No one asked us to go. Not friends. Not family.
Hello.
No one asked us to go. Into the storm. Into the chaos. Into the heartbreak. It's the story that drives us forward.
Welcome.
It's the story that needs to be heard.
We have the member. We have right.
So it'll be interesting.
It's the story that needs to be told. This is why we go.
Welcome to the Situation Room. We have breaking news out of Dominique, Greece. Let's go live to CNN senior international correspondent Nima Elbaz.
For the Syrians and their families,
Welcome back, everyone. These are not the scenes you expect to see in a country's National Assembly, but the seething anger in Venezuela boiled over once again Wednesday as supporters of embattled President Nicolas Maduro stormed the opposition-controlled assembly. A politician says at least 12 people were hurt. You can see some people were bloodied. Mr. Maduro condemned the violence in a statement, but also seemed to blame the opposition. All of this happened on Venezuela's Independence Day. Journalist Jorge Perez Valeri is on the line from Caracas. He has more on the situation. What is the very latest? Is this dramatic escalation at the National Assembly over?
Hi, Amira. Nice to be with you. Well, it's starting to be over, Amira. This started around 10 a.m. in the morning with some pro-governmental groups surrounding the National Assembly building, and then they erupted inside it, causing a clash between some lawmakers, these pro-governmental groups, personnel of the National Assembly. Right now, some people, some journalists have already started to leave the building, since it was still at this moment being surrounded by these pro-governmental groups that earlier stormed the building. So far, 12 people resulted injured. 5 of these are opposition lawmakers.
All right, Jorge Valeri, thank you very much for joining us. Let's get some more perspective on just how bad the Venezuela crisis is right now. Eric Farnsworth joining us from our Washington bureau for that. He is the vice president at the Americas Society and Council of the Americas. Great to see you again, Eric. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Amara. Thanks for having me.
Where is all of this headed? I mean, just last week we were talking about this bizarre and dangerous assault on the Supreme Court, and then now this violence melee breaking out at the National Assembly.
I think the only thing we can be certain of is increased volatility, unfortunately increasing deaths and wounded, and a government that's spinning in some ways out of control. The invasion today was an outrageous escalation against the opposition, the democratically elected opposition, and really the only independent voice that is not under the direct control of the Chavista government. So this is a huge escalation, and frankly, there needs to be a response.
But where is this headed? I mean, something's got to give in the end.
Well, that's what people keep saying, and that's what you would anticipate, but I'm not sure that's entirely clear. The government has called for the end of this month, July 30th, the Constitutional Assembly to rewrite Venezuela's constitution, and assuming they're able to pull that off, and lots of indicators would suggest that they will be able to do that, they can institute a constitution that will allow them to rule indefinitely and to really abolish even the final vestiges of democracy. Meanwhile, the economy is crashing. People are increasingly desperate in terms of health care, lack of food, lack of personal security on the streets. This is a society that is breaking down. So then the question is, how much can the Venezuelan people take? And they have really two options. One is to fight, and the other is flight, which is to say leave the country. And we're already seeing massive people flows across the border into Colombia, Brazil, into the Caribbean and elsewhere.
And I can imagine things will only get worse after the July 30th vote, when you have people in the Venezuela government voting to elect this Constituent Assembly, which would have the powers to rewrite the Constitution.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, because at that point, all the avenues of democratic and peaceful dissent are really off the table, as the government has systematically removed them from the ability of the opposition or even people who are just apolitical to express any dissent at all that isn't oppressed or shouted down or in some cases shut down. The final thing that the opposition might be able to do after the Constituent Assembly would be the continuation of street protests, which have been going on now since late March. Over 90 people have been killed. It's really a terrible situation. Those could continue. They could intensify. And frankly, as we know from the Arab Spring, they could go out of control and lead to something, but we're not quite sure lead to what. So it goes back to my initial point. I think the one thing we can be confident on is increasing volatility and uncertainty.
It's incredible, because we've been covering this for months, and it's just increasing, and you're thinking, well, it gets to a boiling point at some point, and yet people have to deal with what they're dealing with, this economic crisis, shortages in food, basic supplies, Venezuela dealing with the highest inflation rate in the world. And then you had Nicolas Maduro announcing just a few days ago that he was going to be hiking up the minimum wage by 50%, but that's not helping ordinary Venezuelans, is it?
Well, and the truth of the matter is you can hike the minimum wage up almost as high as you want, but if the economy is heading towards hyperinflation, it's by definition never going to be enough. That's the first point. The second point is, if there are no goods in the stores to purchase, it doesn't matter how much money you have. And that, in fact, is the reality. The food is disappearing. Unless you're directly related to the administration in some way or have their favor, it's really hard just to live a normal life in Venezuela, just the basic goods and services that one would need just to live. So that's a real problem. We haven't even talked about the breakdown of the educational system or other things. So this is a society that really is disintegrated.
Really, truly desperate situation in Venezuela. Yeah. Eric Farnsworth, we appreciate your analysis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Egypt's foreign minister says Qatar's response to a list of demands was overall negative and lacked substance. Those demands came from 4 Arab states who met earlier in Cairo. And now the group says they will be continuing their diplomatic and economic boycott of Qatar. Our Jamana Karache has the latest.
Anyone
anyone who's hoping for answers out of that meeting in Cairo, the foreign ministers of the Saudi-led alliance was probably disappointed. They did not announce what the next steps are, how they're going to be handling Qatar's response to their list of 13 demands. The foreign ministers describing the Qatari response as negative. Take a listen to what the Egyptian foreign minister had to say.
This position shows the lack of awareness of how dangerous the situation is and the importance of committing to the principles the international community has agreed upon.
The foreign minister saying they will continue their consultations and announcing that their next meeting will take place in the Bahraini capital, Manama, not specifying when that will happen. Shamana Karachi, CNN, Doha.
Time to take a short break on CNN Today. When we come back, U.S. President Donald Trump plans to meet with China's leader at the G20 summit, but the bromance is far from what it used to be. A closer look at that in a report ahead. Also, the parents of a gravely ill British boy are talking to the White House now about trying to get their son a last hope treatment. We're going to have an update on the very sad case of Charlie Gard.
I'm Peter Zeitlinger. I'm a cinematographer. To make a perfect shot in Jordan is very easy because the untouched nature is the best artist. And in Jordan you find so many beautiful landscapes where millions of colors, but all are in the golden tone. Everything is in harmony, vast, grandiose, endless. This is great for picturesque images. Here you meet people, make friends, even on the roads. When I describe what I saw today, I would say Daga, which means great in Arabic.
Get away. Get home away. Get home away from being treated like sardines. Get home away from it all. Book the whole house at homeaway.com.
Because leaving home doesn't mean living less. Stay at a hotel that has the news source you trust. Stay at a CNN partner hotel.
A destitute single mother who became the world's first billionaire author.
I love writing.
As Harry Potter turns 20, J.K. Rowling joins me to talk about the magic rubbing off on her charity, Lumos.
Our ambition is to end child institutionalization by 2050.
She has huge ambitions and an unexpected surprise for her dedicated fans.
This is a J.K. Rowling scoop, I'm sorry.
Find out in my exclusive interview.
I'm Arwa Damon at the Mosul Dam in Iraq, and this is CNN.
Welcome back, everyone, to CNN Today. I'm Amrell Walker. Time now to get straight to our top stories. U.S. President Donald Trump has just arrived in Warsaw, Poland, on his way to the G20 summit in Germany. He is carrying with him a briefcase full of complex challenges. They include North Korea, international trade, climate change, Syria, and the security of NATO allies. Now, earlier, the UN Security Council held emergency talks on North Korea after its first ever intercontinental ballistic missile launch. The U.S. ambassador called that a clear and sharp military escalation. Nikki Haley says the U.S. will propose new sanctions soon and warned countries trading with North Korea that Washington may cut off trade with them. South Korea's president is backing that push for tougher sanctions, which is something he has not done in the past. During talks with the German Chancellor, Moon Jae-in called the launch a major threat to world peace. Russia, meanwhile, is calling for restraint on all sides. Now, the issue of North Korea looms large over relations between the U.S. and China. And at a time of strained ties, the leaders of the two countries are set to sit down at this weekend's G20 summit in Germany. Our Andrew Stevens has more.
A man that I've gotten to like and respect.
It was hailed as a budding bromance. All smiles as Chinese President Xi Jinping and Donald Trump met at Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort in April. A key issue for the two leaders, North Korea. Trump famously said he listened to Xi explain Chinese-Korean history to him for 10 minutes, and it made him realise, quote, "It's not what you would think." But in the months since, Trump's had a lesson in real politics. This week's missile test showing that on North Korea, the US and China are still miles apart.
The issue with North Korea is quickly becoming a major barrier in the bilateral relationship between Washington and Beijing. Both countries see North Korea as a major headache. They both want to resolve it very earnestly. But the issue is they are not on the same page about how to most effectively deal with North Korea.
Trump appears to believe that China is still the key to controlling North Korea, judging from his tweets on China over the past few days. China is North Korea's closest and main trading partner, and Trump wants China to apply more economic pressure on Kim Jong-un. China says it has implemented UN sanctions, including blocking coal exports from North Korea, which cuts off a key source of hard currency for the Kim regime. The US says that's not enough, and the bromance has been turning sour. President Xi this week complaining of, quote, negative factors which are complicating the US-China relationship. China is dismayed with a recent US arms deal with Taiwan, US sanctions on a Chinese bank with alleged ties to North Korea, and the US Navy sailing through disputed waters in the South China Sea claimed by China as its own.
So we're almost in the end of a honeymoon. So they're doing things that now are getting under China's skin. So it's a combined sort of, now we like you, but on the other hand, now we're going to press you. And as if to say we can manipulate China into behaving the way we want to it, I don't think that works too well.
That is not the way to play China.
I don't think so. I don't think China, especially now, Xi Jinping has to look strong, has to look consistent, has to be the man of stability. He's not going to do something that is at Trump's bidding.
China is also clear that it does not want regime change in North Korea.
The dilemma is as follows. In order for economic sanction to be able to force North Korea to denuclearize, the sanction has to be so tough that it directly threatens the stability of the economic system and therefore threaten the stability of the regime.
Most experts agree that China and the US need to work together to contain North Korea. But as the two leaders prepare to meet at the G20 in Germany, there's little sign that either side is prepared to change their position. Andrew Stevens, CNN, Hong Kong.
The parents of a critically ill British boy say they are feeling renewed hope as the White House and the Vatican have stepped forward with offers to help. But as Diana Magnay reports from London, it's not clear if an experimental therapy will do anything to change little Charlie Gard's devastating condition, or if the courts will even let his family try.
Charlie Gard's parents say that they have been in touch with the White House, that President Trump has a good understanding of this case, and that his offer of help to Charlie was not an off-the-cuff tweet. They also say that the messages of support from the Pope and the US President have given them hope, and they have been in regular contact with the Bambino Gesù Hospital at the Vatican, who've offered to take in Charlie. And clearly what they're trying to do is assemble a team of international experts who could theoretically provide this therapy for him. The president of the Bambino Gesù Hospital said this was about empowering the parents, giving them the final decision as to Charlie's treatment.
The hospital has told us that the board, for legal reasons, cannot transfer the baby to us. Therefore, this is now the sad note of this event. He will wait there for the mother, and if scientific evidence can be shown that this treatment can do something, I don't know. We will continue to dig on the subject, and our scientists, when they have news, they'll speak directly with the mother.
Still, the court order for now means that Charlie cannot be moved.
Great Ormond Street Hospital, where he is, are delaying turning off his life support, presumably for the parents' sake. But it is highly unlikely that this court order can be reversed, barring the sudden arrival of fresh medical evidence that could make the doctors who've been examining Charlie's case change their minds. Theresa May in Parliament today expressed her sympathies both for the family and for the team of doctors looking after him.
Any parent in these circumstances will want to do everything possible to and explore every option for their seriously ill child. But I also know that no doctor ever wants to be placed in the terrible position where they have to make such heartbreaking decisions. The Honourable Lady referred to the fact that we have that court process here. I'm confident that Great Ormond Street Hospital have and always will consider any offers or new information that has come forward with consideration of the well-being of a desperately ill child.
An impossible situation for a terminally ill baby boy, born healthy, whose parents understandably want to pursue every option before they'll be able to let him go. Diana Magnay, CNN, London.
Up next on the program, as the world looks to healthier plant-based drinks, a popular Hong Kong company is hoping to meet that need.
Hong Kong, long known as a global financial hub, but there's much more to this city of 7 million people.
Hong Kong is a very eclectic place. It's a city of big contrast.
Go beyond its striking skyline and learn what makes this place unlike any other on Earth. Experience its creative spirit and get a taste of its unique culture.
I'm Christy Loostout in Tayo, and join me for Iconic Hong Kong,
a CNN special Friday.
All new Inside the Middle East. Join Becky Anderson this month as we explore the Islamic history of Spain. Meet the people celebrating their Middle Eastern heritage.
I have the strong intention to connect again with our ancestors.
And discover how its influence is felt in every beat of a flamenco dance, in every mouthful of food, and in the beauty of the architecture. Inside the Middle East, Saturday on CNN, in association with MISC.
From the rising of the sun to its setting, this is the Irish capital, as seen by only those who dare to test the waters, to ride, to cheer, to read, to taste, and to dress the part.
I'm James Williams. Join me for Dublin in 24 hours.
Sunday on CNN, in association with Qatar Airways.
Make way for the majors.
I love playing at majors, it's great.
He has the home course advantage. Rising star Matt Fitzpatrick prepares to make a run at the Open Championship.
You know, we've got the best fans that there is, so, you know, coming back to the Open, it's brilliant.
And Arya Jutanagar knows how to win a major and says she's ready to do it again. Join us for a major edition of Living Golf, today on CNN, in partnership with Rolex.
You know, sometimes technology can trip up the best of us. It even happened to tennis star Rafael Nadal. A few fans had to come to his aid Tuesday at a London grocery store in the Wimbledon Village. One of them tweeted this image of Nadal, who was stumped by a self-service checkout machine. I'm sure there was a lot of women happy to help him. The man says the tennis star bought a 6-pack of Diet Coke and didn't need a bag. He added on Twitter, environmentally conscious and awesome at tennis. Nadal is ranked #2 in the world and is pushing for a 3rd Wimbledon title. More on that in World Sport in just a few minutes. Well, Volvo may have just sped up the beginning of the end of gas-only cars. The Chinese-owned company announced on Wednesday it will soon phase out conventional engines. In less than 2 years, all its new cars will be either hybrid or electric only. Charisse Pham has more from Hong Kong.
Volvo is going all in on the electric car. The company announced today that from 2019 onwards, every model will have an electric motor. This makes Volvo the first traditional car maker to slam on the brakes on the internal combustion engine and make the shift to pure electric and hybrid production. Volvo's president and chief executive said the decision was driven by the growing demand for electric cars, saying this announcement marks the end of the solely combustion engine-powered car. Volvo says it will launch 5 fully electric cars in the next few years, which will put it in direct competition with Tesla. Tesla has so far had no serious rivals when it comes to pure electric cars. Volvo's shift to electric was likely driven by Chinese car maker Geely. They bought Volvo in 2010. China's been quick to embrace electric vehicles. More than half of the world's electric cars are sold in China, and the government says it wants 5 million electric cars on Chinese roads by 2020. Cherise Pham, CNN, Hong Kong.
The maker of a popular soy-based drink in Hong Kong is looking to expand. Vitasoy started out decades ago and is tapping into the growing demand for more plant-based nutrition. CNN discovers the company's secret to long-lasting success. Christy Lou Stout reports.
People here frequently eat out, so the city has thousands of dining options. They range from upscale eateries to local diners known as cha chan tangs, which translates to tea restaurant. On the menu, you'll find instant noodles, eggs, and really thick toast. Of course, tea is always served in a variety of ways. Milk tea is a Hong Kong staple, but lemon tea is also popular. These classic flavors are also captured by local beverage maker Vitasoy. The company started back in 1940, and its story begins with the soybean. K.S. Low wanted to develop a drink to fight malnutrition, so he mass-produced soy milk as a cheap source of protein. But the business struggled for several years to make money. Today, Vitasoy products are available in more than 40 countries, with sales totaling around $700 million.
I think the beautiful thing about Vitasoy is that the mission that was at the inception of the company in 1940 about plant-based sustainable nutrition somehow is extremely relevant today.
CEO Roberto Guidetti says he tasted Vitasoy's original soy milk for the first time nearly 20 years ago while working in Guangzhou, China. The mainland is now Vitasoy's biggest market, accounting for half of its revenue. Vitasoy has 4 factories there, as well as operations in Singapore and Australia. Products for Hong Kong consumers are still made locally. This factory opened 30 years ago, and Man Cheung has worked here for 20.
We focus on maintaining the classic recipe. Hong Kong people love this traditional taste.
The company strives to blend tradition with innovation, launching new products every year. Vitasoy recently expanded its lineup to include coconut and almond milks.
There is a consumer trend and there is a market trend for healthier, high-quality, plant-based products. We see this all over the world.
Guidetti hopes to accelerate Vitasoy's international expansion. The family-controlled firm recently established a new joint venture in the Philippines, hoping this beloved Hong Kong brand can master the recipe for success overseas.
And that is our time. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Amara Walker. World Sport is up next.